All right.
What is up? I'm back. New seat. The view is a lot better here, I have to say. But cool. Everyone, thanks for sticking around. We are going to talk about a specific kind of upgrade to Bitcoin, Op CTV and Op CSFS. So I think we're going to kind of do this in tranches. We're going to kind of get to why we're discussing it, kind of explain some of the use cases, and kind of discuss maybe how we can potentially upgrade this going forward. I think first, though, let's just do introductions. We'll go left to right. Evan, start with you. Just do introductions first before we get going.
Hey guys, my name's Evan Kaloudis. I'm the founder of ZEUS. We are a self-custodial Lightning wallet and Lightning service provider.
I'm Shinobi, the technical editor at Bitcoin Magazine.
Hi, I'm Owen Kemeys. I am a designer at Foundation Devices. We make hardware wallets.
Okay, cool. So, and obviously Janusz was on the last panel as well, so we'll skip that. I think the first place I want to start, though, is kind of setting context first. I think first, what's Bitcoin script? What are like the opcodes that are within it? So I think, Evan, if you just want to explain that really quickly, and then we can kind of get into the potentially the additions we can have there. So yeah, just what's Bitcoin script at a high level?
That's Bitcoin's native scripting language. You could set certain conditions by which funds can be spent. Basically needs to fulfill these conditions for a transaction to be valid, right?
Yeah, think about it like everybody thinks in terms of when you send your Bitcoin somewhere, you're sending it to an address. In reality, that's essentially a little computer program that says what you have to do to spend those Bitcoins. So like the most common case is just sign with the private key that matches the public key. But there's a lot more complicated conditions that you can add beyond a basic thing like that.
Anything to add, Owen?
Yeah, so there's like a couple of basics here. So if you use Bitcoin on-chain, you're fairly used to what you're checking, what you're locking the coins to is proving who you are, basically. That only you should be the one that's be allowed to spend these coins. But there are other things you can do to lock them as well. The most obvious example being time locks, where I can spend it whenever I want. No, I can spend it, but maybe not until next week or 3 months from now or something. And that simple addition gives us like the whole Lightning network. So these little ingredients are very powerful, actually.
Okay. And then so I think maybe first, Shinobi, if you want to explain like what opcodes are, and then we can go into like specifically CTV and CSFS, like what they could potentially bring. So first, what are opcodes as well?
Yeah, so an opcode is essentially like the basic building block in that program that you write to lock your Bitcoin. So like the basic just sending to a public key, like that uses something called opcheck-sig. So essentially that takes the public key that's defined when you send Bitcoin somewhere, and it expects the signature, and then it just ensures that that signature is a valid signature from that public key. And so, like Owen was saying with time locks, that's another thing. There's Op CSV, Op CLTV, and those do a relative time lock or an absolute time lock. So you can say that this Bitcoin can't be spent until like a week after money was actually sent to this address. Or with the absolute time lock, you can set a definitive time, like this exact date in the future, say November 12th. The coins can't move till then. And that's to give a little bit of dynamism in terms of how you can restrict like when that coin can be spent.
Yeah, both are essential really for Lightning Network. Without those two sort of time locks, we can't have Lightning at all.
Okay, so if we have these these different opcodes and the way that we can spend Bitcoins and kind of setting the conditions in which we can spend them, why do we need new ones, and why do we need CTV and check-sig from Stack? So what is CTV, and what is like this combination of opcodes, and what, like at a high level, what does it enable?
All right, well, to kind of start for context, like every scaling solution that exists for Bitcoin except for side chains, the Lightning Network, state chains, Arc, BitVM, all of these rely on pre-signed transactions. The entire security model of users' funds is whatever set of keys are actually locking the coin, you sign transactions ahead of time, ensuring that funds are distributed how they should be from users. And so that's kind of the core technological bedrock that everything we are doing to try to make sure people can cost effectively transact with Bitcoin is built on. CTV is essentially kind of a shortcut to creating those pre-signed transactions. Like doing things now, you actually have to get all of the users involved together, coordinating to go through that signing process. What CTV would allow you to do is simply define the hash of the transaction that you want to pre-sign, and you just use that as the address essentially. So you get the exact same kind of guarantees that you would from everybody going through the process of pre-signing, but you don't have to go through that coordination, getting everyone online together at the same time and actually signing things. CheckSig from Stack is kind of a variant of the OpCheckSig code that I mentioned earlier. When you use OpCheckSig, what that is checking the signature against, because you actually have to sign something, it just assumes the transaction that's being verified. That's what was signed, and that's what the signature is being verified against. With CheckSig from Stack, you can arbitrarily sign and prove a signature against any data that you verify through the course of that program. And so with these two things together, you can have a massive optimization of the whole pre-signing process with CTV. And then combining that with CheckSig from Stack, you can have that hash that effectively commits to the pre-signed transaction be authorized by actually signing and getting everyone together to do that. And so that creates a situation, if you structure a program right, you can have like the key for CheckSig from Stack, and then the call to verify against a CTV hash. And you can dynamically, without spending the coins on chain, create new CTV hashes that would be valid to spend that coin off chain, just using the CheckSig from Stack signature to re-sign a new hash every time you need to do this. And so that creates the possibility of a floating signature, essentially, where that is not stuck committing to the exact transaction ID that you want to use. It can dynamically change over time. And so given that everything we're building is based on pre-signed transactions, like this is simultaneously making the whole process of pre-signing things much more efficient with CTV. And then when combined with CheckSig from Stack, it's a lot more flexible in terms of changing things after the fact without having to move those coins on chain and pay blockchain fees for the process of doing that.
And I think the other thing, though, is there's also this word that's always associated, like maybe with CTV specifically, but it's the term like covenant, right? So Owen, like, what do we also mean by when we use the word like we want to add covenants to Bitcoin and CTV is potentially a path to do that? Like, what does that mean when people are saying that?
So I said earlier on that one of the core ingredients of Bitcoin is choosing who can spend your coins, and obviously that should be like me if I'm the one that's receiving it. And then the additional factor of adding when can I spend my coins is a useful thing that lets us get to like the Lightning Network, for example. The way to think about a covenant is also choosing how those coins can be spent and specifying ahead of time they can be spent this way, maybe going to this specific address, but they can't be spent any other way. I'm committing that I can only go this route, or maybe multiple different routes, but they're all defined in advance. And you may think, is that useful? I don't know, but something to think about is, what if this address was not just your address, but shared with someone else in some way? If you're counterparties, you can set it up so that I don't have to trust you. I know that we've agreed in advance that the coins cannot be spent any other way than these 3 routes we've predefined, for example. And that's an extremely powerful little primitive. Maybe, I don't know if any of you guys would correct any of that, or if we're about right. And I think for CheckSig from Stack, and I'm less confident on this, and maybe you will correct me, is that lets us swap out little parts of the transaction ahead of time. I mean, after the fact. So we can define a route, and then later on, we can agree that later on, I am able to change this section as long as I provide a signature too. And that gives you so much flexibility of like interesting constructions that we can do that unlock lots of scaling and other fun things that come with it. Please correct me if I need to be.
Yeah, so Evan, like, based on that, like, explanation, though, like, what are some of the applications then you think? Because, like, that's kind of, I guess, like, when people discuss, like, on Twitter and different forums, Like, why would we bother adding this? Like, what are the what's the application space that you see as like really useful and can be kind of, if we can already do it with pre-signed transactions, like what are the applications that you think are made even better by CTV and check-sig from Stack?
Well, there's a lot of talk about what it can enable for L2s. So Lightning specifically, you could do things more efficiently with these constructs called coin pools, where you could potentially onboard multiple people onto these L2s at the same time, more cost effectively, especially when you are exiting the construct, because you could put those constraints in place ahead of time. There's some things in terms of channel state backups. With Lightning, you only need the latest state, so it could be effective there. There are benefits to systems like Arc. There are tons of applications and new constructs that we can work with that both make it more flexible and more cost efficient. But the thing that gets me really most excited for Covenants is the application of vaults. And vaults allows you to essentially, I would say, and make self-custody for an individual much safer. You actually add this new element beyond the application of a basic time lock that you could have for a transaction. You add time on your side in a brand new way. So a vault is basically where you could envision you would keep your long-term savings, right? And basically in a vault, you can't go and right away make a payment to an on-chain address. You basically go into this lockup state where funds are pending. It's going out the door, but it's gonna wait in a predefined period, say 2 weeks, 4 weeks, a year, whatever suits your use case the best. And then during that lockup period, at any time you decide, okay, no, I don't want to go forward with this transaction, you can reverse it or send it to a set of predefined addresses that belong to you. So let's say a worst case scenario, like nightmare situation. You're self-custodying your funds, this is your savings, someone comes into your house, pulls a gun on you, forces you to give up your seed phrase, right? Well, now the attacker can't just force you to send to an address. It has to go up through this lock period. So now you have this grace period, which hopefully you can escape that situation and you could reverse course while it's still in that lockup period. So vaults, I think, are super, super important for making self-custody more safe, right? You don't have to really rely on these third parties or like lawyers or third-party signing services like a Casa or an Unchained to be like a third party that has to sign off on every transaction for you. You can sort of keep everything in-house, which is super exciting.
I think some of the pushback, though, on the vault side is there's not, correct me if I'm wrong, but no one's really trying to do vaults right now, for example, with pre-signed transactions. So there's this pushback that there's been no market demand because why would we do CTV then if people aren't trying to experiment with today? Shinobi, what's your response to that?
Well, it's just the complexity. When you, the whole point of a vault is worst case, if somebody steals your money, you have this lockup period that Evan was talking about where you can send that back to an address you control. So you can stop somebody from stealing your funds. When you try to do that with pre-signed transactions, you have to essentially in a long chain of transactions, define all of this ahead of time, the amount that you are going to try to withdraw, how much is going to go back into the vault. And once you do that and set that up with pre-signed transactions, you can never change any of it. And then another aspect of that is if you ever lose your copies of those pre-signed transactions, when you do this way, you should ideally delete the private key that you used to sign those, just so somebody can't take that and then like bypass the whole vault system. So if you lose those pre-signed transactions, you have lost your money. When you actually do this natively, with opcodes in Bitcoin itself, you don't have to keep track of those pre-signed transactions. There's no key that you have to delete, and it's just a lot simpler for a user to manage. So the fact that people aren't doing this in this more complicated way that actually adds new risk to users, I don't think says anything about users' desire or lack of a desire for this. It's just them wanting something that's simple and safe, that they don't have to deal with all these complex extra things to figure out to get that increased security.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think, Owen, before we kind of pivot towards a different kind of direction for the discussion, I wanted to ask you for your thoughts on that, because you're actually working at a company that's trying to help more Bitcoiners like self-custody their coins. So I don't know if you have anything to add about vaults and using CTV and checksig from stack to enable that.
Yeah, so we see a lot of people that are anxious about taking self-custody, and if you're not taking self-custody, you're not really getting the benefits of Bitcoin. I mean, sure, number goes up, that's great, but the whole point is to be independent, to have there's no one that can turn you off, that can turn your banking off, that can withdraw access to your funds or something. But that does require a level of personal responsibility that can be intimidating to some people. It doesn't need to be, but it is a new and unfamiliar thing. And with this simple vault construct, we can make that a lot more welcoming, much more palatable, because you can basically give yourself an undo button. You can say, okay, my cold stored funds, my life savings, I put in this special bucket over here that can't be spent from without a 3-month delay period or something. And then if I mess up in some way, or someone breaks into my house and forces me to move it or something, I know that I have 3 months to go and just send that right back. And that gives people a lot of reassurance. Like when you're self-custodying, and truly, there's no one you can call for help. Like once you send it on Bitcoin, it's gone, and that's a strength and a weakness. But with this, we can give you something that makes that less intimidating. You can pull it right back if that's not what you meant to do.
Okay, and I think that for me, that sounds extremely useful. I think making kind of a lot of the coordination efforts and different layer 2 protocols more efficient is also very useful. It seems like there's the trade-off space for this combination of opcodes doesn't have any really bad unintended consequences, really complex scripts that can do very AMMs and all that crazy stuff, which we're kind of scared about from an MEV perspective. Why, and a lot of application developers want it, so kind of what's the pushback? This proposal's been around for quite a long time. Kind of what do you guys see as the pushback, and why this is not moving forward, and we're not why don't we have an activation client? Why are we not trying to do this as the next upgrade? What's kind of the community pushback on it?
Well, I mean, I'd say there's two separate sources of a lot of pushback. There's actually a decent amount of developers not really excited or wanting to prioritize activating these things. And that's because, like we've kind of gone through, most of what you can do with these things are optimize things that you can already do with pre-signed transactions. The capabilities that they enable are already possible now. This is just simplifying what you need to do to actually implement these things or use these things. And so for a lot of developers, their thought process is this doesn't do enough to justify going through the work of implementing it and activating it on the network. And then from the end user side of things, I don't want to say entirely, I don't think that would be fair, but I think the vast majority of pushback from users is just much more non-technical, less sophisticated users who think that these opcodes are much more powerful than they actually are, and that there's the potential they could enable unforeseen things that could come with negative consequences because they don't have a solid understanding of just how simple these are, and that all they're doing is optimizing things that are already possible now.
Yeah, Evan, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, because what do you see as the next step here? Because you're an application developer, you seem to be in favor of kind of implementing this upgrade to Bitcoin. What do you want to be the next steps, and how do you kind of foresee moving this discussion forward?
Next steps, I'd like to see some more proof of concepts, although we've seen some great code for vaults. I think people messing around with L2s and developing like new applications like that. Some proof of concepts would probably be good. But yeah, I mean, really, I'd like to see an activation client in 2026. I think, you know, ample time has passed. People have had time to voice their objections. Once we have a few more proof of concepts to really show the strengths of this upgrade, I'd really like to see something get out the door. I think it really just comes down to, you know, someone has to step up to the plate and champion this thing. And people are either, you know, scared of the backlash from, you know, other efforts in the past, like, say, from people like Jeremy Rubin, who've come up and really got burnt out doing it. And others just, you know, trying to focus on, you know, their own efforts or businesses. It's really an energy-intensive thing to go out and champion this and try to get everyone on board and gain consensus. And I think it's just especially tricky in this environment where there's just so many Bitcoin users out there that have these broad misconceptions and you know, have really attributed a lot of the things that they don't like to see in Bitcoin, like, you know, inscriptions and NFTs. They attribute it falsely to the Taproot upgrade. And yeah, it's just a lot of effort that needs to be put in terms of education and, you know, presenting the case for this thing.
I think where we're at is it's quite a funny kind of politics kind of thing almost. Like we think of Bitcoin as this, it is a digital thing, it is code, it is software, but this is all run by people and written by people and changed by people. And where we're at now is like arguments over what exactly is the right thing to do. So they touched earlier on about how some of the current arguments are, should it do more? Should it do less than what's currently proposed? I don't want it to do anything at all yet. And we're seeing an amusing trend of some of the developers starting to take a look at this seriously, who've maybe dismissed it before, and they go and start messing around and playing with it, and then they find out that, oh, actually it does something that I really want to do, and that's actually really useful, and now suddenly they're on board. Or the other thing is seeing people, oh no, I lost my train of thought. Saying, right, I'm gonna go look at this again, I'm gonna take this apart, I'm gonna rip it to shreds, and they end up writing something from scratch, and they're finding that it's actually very similar to what's already been written like long ago, because there's not that many ways to execute the things that you need to do here. So you get this, it's just fascinating, like watching the politics work through all the different people and parties and vested interests and so on. Well, I think we're gonna get there slowly, but it's just, people take time.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, there is no organizational structure to Bitcoin. Like, it's very common for people to look at Bitcoin core developers as some organization in charge or some authority that is able to make decisions for the network as a whole. And at the end of the day, that's not how this works. Like, the network is composed out of all of us running the software that we run, like actually participating in the network. And at the end of the day, it does not matter what core developers build or don't build. Something will not go live on the network unless all of us choose to run that software, unless businesses actually conducting economic activity choose to run that software. And so this perception that core developers have some authority is exactly inverted from the actual reality. All of us do, all of the people running businesses, actually making transactions on the network, we're the ones who decide whether something activates or doesn't activate. And I think like that is really at the heart of kind of why this has become such a messy conversation over the last few years. And we really just have to get through people's heads that how things actually work is more often than not the exact opposite way that people think it does.
Yeah, and I think kind of like it's a final question, right, is, you know, we've kind of said that this group of opcodes is just really optimizing things that we can already do, making applications, I guess, safer for end users and things of that nature. And you just mentioned there, Shinobi, that, you know, people running businesses and different things need to kind of be aware of this because they need to additionally run the software if these upgrades are included. What is like, kind of as a final question for each of you to answer, is like, what is like the next step? Where should people go learn about this? Where should people like try to go get their feet wet and kind of learn what these capabilities are and kind of the trade-offs and why we should potentially consider adding them into Bitcoin? I guess, Evan, we can start with you and just go left to right.
Oh man, that's a loaded one. There's discussions going on all over the place, from Twitter to Nostr. Delving Bitcoin forum is fantastic. The mailing lists. Really, we need more accessible media on this, for sure. But my final pitch on this is, in a world where Bitcoin's decentralization is threatened by things like ETFs and government treasuries, this upgrade makes Bitcoin self-custody better, and we should be striving to make self-custody in Bitcoin as great an experience as it can be.
I mean, I've personally written a decent amount on these subjects. If you look up my author page under Shinobi on Bitcoin Magazine, Stefan Livera is a great podcaster who frequently brings developers and technical people on to discuss things. As Evan said, Delving Bitcoin is kind of a forum that a lot of the developers talk and discuss these issues on. That's a great place, but it's really, you just have to go out and find the information and actually take the time to try to digest it. Like I said with authority, like there is no single place where things are decided or all of the information is. You kind of just have to put in the time and look around.
Yeah, I would go along with that. Take an interest. Go and take a look. Like, information is out there. Go and learn about things. You can understand how things work. It might take a while to kind of figure it out and build the model in your head, but once you do, it's a fascinating world. This is such a rare opportunity to be involved in something like this. Like, if we're right about this, we shape the whole future direction of the world. If we're right about this whole Bitcoin thing, and there are no gatekeepers, there's no one saying you're not allowed to, or there's no secretive cabal that locks you out that makes the real decisions. Like, it's just us. It's all of us. It's just idiots like us up here on stage that we just talked about this stuff a lot, and now we're here talking to you guys about it. Like, take an interest. It's fun. There's lots to learn. But get involved.
Guys, thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you.